Are you tired of spending too much of your hard-earned money at the supermarket? Are you dreaming of farm-fresh eggs, homegrown veggies, and homemade everything? Well, welcome to Ditch the Store, where we break free from supermarket dependence and take back control of our food and household essentials. I'm CJ, and I'm here to show you that life is too short for store-bought eggs. So let's get started. G'day everyone, CJ here for another episode of Ditch the Store. Episode 119. I still pinch myself sometimes that we've made it this far into the episodes, and I haven't given up. I love doing this. I actually really enjoy doing the podcasts, even though sometimes it gets to like this one, the last minute before it's kind of due tomorrow, and I'm madly recording. Anyway, I am in southern New South Wales for anybody who hasn't listened before, and it has been a little bit of a blast of cold weather here over the last week. We spent a couple of days up in Sydney. I have a daughter who's I want to say talented, but that's probably just a mum bragging. She is a reasonably talented rugby union player, and she was selected for the representative team from ACT. So we went up to Sydney for 3 days, and while we were there, everybody down here towards Canberra and southern New South Wales froze their bits off. Anyway, we came home, and despite what people say, we left the farm for 3 full days without anybody here to look after it. And so this is one of those things where people say, oh, I could never live on a farm because if you have animals, you can't leave. You can. You just have to be really, really organised before you go. And you have to be able to ensure that everybody's going to have enough water, enough food, enough protection while you are not there to do it for them. Now, in the past, we have had disasters when we've gone away and we've come back and found a deceased animal somewhere. That animal probably would have been deceased whether we were actually here at the property or not in those cases. However, it's still not pleasant to come home to. But we came home after 3 days away and everybody was looking awesome. Young T-Bone, who is our most junior member on the farm, who is a Black Angus bull calf, he has been drinking up a storm on his mum, and he looked fitter and healthier than everybody else on the farm. So you can leave your farm and go away. That being said, I'm just about to start offering myself as a farm sitter because, I'm reasonably handy around animals, and I'm happy to farm sit so people can actually have a holiday. That would be nice for them. Anyway, fire's going in here. House is nice and warm. Outside's freezing, but we are talking about sourdough discard this week. Now, through the process of talking about sourdough, I've mentioned a little bit about discard, but I know it's one of the things when I first started doing my sourdough, I used to sometimes go, and I went over the top. I would have too much starter. I now have cut back and I only use 50 grams of starter, 50 grams of flour, 50 grams of water to keep my starter going. But back when I first started, I was doing like 100 grams of starter to 100 flour, 100 water. And then I'd only use 100 grams for cooking. And so I'd have all this leftover starter. And you're supposed to put equal amounts of water and flour in with your starter to boost it back up again. And so I would end up with this discard, is what it's called, is the leftover that you take out of your starter that you don't need to put back in. Now, some people will use that to make new starter, and certainly I have 2 starters going at the moment because I was offering it to anybody for free. So again, if you live in the Canberra area and you would like to have some starter to have a crack at it, let me know, DM me, and I will get some starter to you. It's good if you've got old starter to kind of start with because it'll boost up really quickly. But I wanted to talk about discard because people, same as myself, when you're first starting out, you think, holy shit, there's so much discard. What do I do with this? If I'm feeding it all the time, what do I do with my discard? You can use it, but we're going to talk about it first. So what is sourdough discard? It's the portion of the starter that is removed before you feed the rest of it. So you take some out and you either use it for cooking or you throw it away. Now, if you're planning to bake bread, well, if it's active starter, you use it for bread making. But what if you've had it sitting in the fridge for a while? We're away for 3 days. I've just come back and fed my starters this morning. What do you do with the discard that you throw out? Now, you can just throw it out. There's no problem with that. But it kind of seems like a bit of a waste. And I am the queen of recycling. So I hate throwing things out that could be used. It's not that discard is not rotten or bad. It's still active starter that's just died down, so it's not as active. It's not active enough necessarily to make bread with, but it's just unfed starter. That's what discard is referred to as unfed starter. But really importantly, it is still yeast. It is still the wild yeast that you use to make your bread, and it still has loads and loads of good bacteria in it. It's still gone through that fermentation process. So it's still better, in my eyes, than commercial yeast. So what can you use it for? If it's not active and you're not, so I would always say use active starter for bread making. It gives you a better loaf. However, if it's not active, what can you use it for? And there's still heaps of things you can. Crackers, which I've only just had a go at making, and they turn out pretty good considering. And certainly it seems much healthier than the crackers that the biscuits that kids would get at the shops. And from my American friends, we call biscuits things like Jatz crackers. They're biscuits to us. I know biscuits for you guys is more like scones for us. It's more like a doughy kind of bread. And I've tried biscuits over in the States when we went to Disneyland. We went to Disneyland and we had a breakfast. We had a buffet breakfast with the characters over in Disneyland, and it was bacon and eggs and sausages and gravy, and it was gravy and biscuits. And I'd never had it before, and it was awesome. But they're more like scones in Australian eyes. That's what we refer to as a scone. They're a savoury scone for those Australians that are sitting there going, why would you eat scones with gravy? It's a savoury scone, but yeah, crackers for us, biscuits interchangeable. So you can make crackers with it, just your little biscuits used for dips and things like that, or to have some cheese and salami on. Crumpets. We make crumpets all the time with our discard. It's so simple to make. And I've got a couple of recipes that I'll kind of run through with you, but crumpets are super, super simple to make. And if you are a person who's feeding your sourdough starter first thing in the morning, then that's a great time to whip out some and make some crumpets. Because, kids will have it for breakfast, and my kids love sourdough crumpets. Pancakes, again, you get a real fluffy kind of, build out of it. And likewise, waffles. We have a waffle line that we use, and making waffles, you can get, instead of getting a real baked, hard, crispy kind of waffle, you can get more of a soft waffle out of the sourdough. Flatbreads, which I have had a go at making out. I normally make my flatbread just with straight flour and no yeast, just with a bit of yogurt, but you can do it with sourdough starter and it tastes really nice. I did make some and I always get how to say it wrong, but gozlemi, the flatbread with the mince in between. I made some sourdough flatbread the other week to put the mince in, and the kids annihilated them. They loved them. They were really yummy. And obviously muffins, cakes. I've seen cheesecakes. I've seen granola with bits of sourdough put into it to give it that slight tang. There's so many things you can use your discard for. Now, why would you use it? I mean, like I said, you can simply throw it away. To me, that the wasty part of me goes, no, don't throw it away. It's still good. Waste not, want not. It's still good flour and water in there. You can still use it. So if you can use it, use it. If you can't, don't beat yourself up about it. It's quicker than a loaf. So because it's not active starter, generally when you're refeeding your starter, it's not good for making bread, which takes sometimes up to 24 hours, even longer. But recipes that are same day recipes like crackers, crumpets, waffles, you can absolutely make them using discard. It's fermented. So, and this is the big one for me, is it's still better than commercial yeast. It does give things a bit of a rise. It still gives them, there's still a certain level of yeast in there, even if it's not an active starter. But you get the better flavour out of it, that tangy flavour, and better gut health. So for people like me who are a little bit sensitive to gluten, because it's been broken down, even though you're mixing it with other flours and things like that, it's broken down, and therefore you get that slight beneficial gut bacteria, or bacteria that's good for your gut or for people's guts who can't handle gluten as much. And it is freezer friendly. So if you think, God, I really couldn't be stuffed doing something with my discard when I'm refreshing my sourdough because I just don't have time, that's fine. Whack it in the fridge. I'll give you some time frames to work with, but it absolutely keeps in the fridge and the freezer. I've never put it in the freezer. I've only ever stored it in the fridge. but you can store it in the freezer and use it at a later date. Just got to remember it's in there and remember what it is. If I've been cleaning out the freezer the last couple of weeks, we've been doing a bit of an overhaul of the kitchen cabinets. And there are some things in there that I pull out and go, God, why did I not label this shit better? Because I have no idea. So if you do have a steady stream of discard, you can either store it in the fridge to use later or make something that day if you're home and you've got time. If you don't stress. Just throw it out. Honestly, it's not worth getting your knickers in a knot over. But make sure it's labelled so that nobody goes into the fridge going, what's this? Now, how to store it. In the fridge, airtight jar, so just in a normal jar, and you need to use it within 7 to 10 days. Now, I will say that I have previously stored it in the fridge and forgotten about it. If you open it up and it has that really acidic acetone smell to it, and it's got the dark liquid on top, I would never use it at that point. I have once used refresh discard out of starter that had that, and the smell and taste was overpowering. So I would not recommend that. If it's good to that point where it's a really underfed starter and it's got the black liquid, the hooch on it, I would just throw that out and start again. So don't stress if it's got that on it. If it has mold or anything like that on it, do not use it. It's not good. That would be the same for starter. So any of the things that you wouldn't use your starter for, if it's got mold or streaks through it or the smell is so overpoweringly acetone, same goes for discard. Don't use it. In the freezer, you can put it into small containers and just defrost it in the fridge overnight to bring it back to life kind of thing, to use it. On the bench, and believe me, I have let my starter sit on the bench for days at a time and then come back and gone, oh shit, I forgot that was there. 1 to 2 days max at room temperature of about 21 degrees Celsius, so normal household room temperature. You could leave it there for 1 to 2 days, but I would always do the sniff test first. If it's really, really acidic, toss it. Wait for your next lot of discard to try and do it with that. Now, why don't we just use discard in bread? Well, we do. We actually take it out, but that's when it's active. So we're talking about non-active discard. So active discard, always use it in bread. You'll get your best rise out of it. Non-active discard, there's not enough activity, bubbles in it to raise up a whole bread dough. And that's why we tend not to use it in there, because you'll end up with a flatter dough. You'll end up with a dough that's not as bubbly and doesn't have the big air pockets in it and things like that. It can be too acidic. Like I said, the taste can be a little overpowering if you've left it go a bit too long. So if it's too acidic, if it's too old, it does get a real strong tang to it. Now, some people might really like that. That might be what they're after, in which case have at it, go for it. But I found it too strong, too overpowering, so I wouldn't do it again. And it also lacks a bit of fermentation power. Because it's on the downside, because it's not the active starter that you have for your bread, it can just take a lot longer to get to a bread fermentation stage. So if you use it for bread, you can end up with flat, gummy, and overly sour loaves. So it's not recommended to do it that way. But there are lots of other things that you can use it for. Like I said before, there's lots of things out there. Now, the thing is with most of the recipes that you find, and if you search sourdough discard online, oh my God, you'll be inundated. There's a really clever lady out there called the Clever Carrot, and she has a million discard recipes. So most discard recipes, the thing with them is they don't rely on the bread, on the baking rising. So it'll be something like crackers, something like waffles, something like crumpets, where with the crumpets, to get the rise in those, and I'll read out a recipe in a sec, it's got bicarb soda in it, and that's what gives it its rise. So you don't require the rise from the discard. Excuse me. So most of those recipes for discard you'll see that they add bicarb soda to get the rise instead, or baking powder, instead of using the actual active starter. The tang adds flavour, so certainly the crumpets that we have, and we're big honey eaters here because I'm a beekeeper. So we like our crumpets with a little bit of tang in them because we have honey over the top of them, and that just adds to the flavour. And the fermentation we discussed, it's better for digestion. If you're using a wild yeast instead of a commercial yeast, those people that react poorly to yeast, And certainly, I sometimes question whether it's the gluten that I react to or whether it's the commercial baker's yeast. Because I had a couple of pieces of bread while we were away up in Sydney, and my gut was not good afterwards. I really think it's maybe a little bit of part A, a little bit of part B. So fermentation from sourdough definitely sits on my stomach a lot better, whether it's the gluten issue or whether it's the commercial yeast, uncertain. Now, the main thing is don't, if you're like me and you hate the idea of throwing something out, go for it with using discard for things. If you think, oh my God, I couldn't think of anything worse than adding another thing to my to-do list, and using the discard to make more things just seems like a lot more work for me, don't stress about it. Just, all I do is don't pour it straight down the sink. I sometimes, with my chooks, so these are my hot tips for what to do with your discard if you're not using it for human consumption. You can literally just water it down and pour it down the sink. Once it's watered down, it's like a milky drink going down the sink. It's not going to block your drains up. If you try and pour it straight down there, it could potentially block your drains up because it does set hard if it's left out in the air. So if you're going to pour it down your sink, make sure you whisk it with some water to make it really watery before it goes down there. But because, again, queen of recycling, hate waste, I will quite often get the fry pan out, especially if OJ in the morning sometimes makes himself a toasty bacon and egg sandwich. If the fry pan's still sitting on the hob when I'm doing my bread, I will put a little bit of oil in there and pour the discard into the fry pan and make like a flat pancake bread. Not for me, for the chooks. So what I do is I cook it so that it's not going down the sink and I'm actually using it. And then once that's cooked and cooled, I just break it up into pieces and put it in the chook scrap bucket. So when I go out to feed the chooks get a sourdough pancake in their scrap bucket. And I tell you what, they fight over it. They absolutely love it. They know, as soon as they see it now, they know what it is. And it's all in, stacks on, trying to get, and I break it up into pieces so that it goes to more girls, because otherwise there is genuine fights over it. So if you really don't want to use your discard, but you really don't want to waste it, and you've got chooks, that's a great way of doing it. I won't pour the discard in without cooking it. And the reason I won't is because I have in the past, and I end up with goopy dough, like liquidy dough in my scrap bucket, which then requires a lot more washing out than it normally would. Plus the chooks, they end up with goopy sourdough starter all over their beaks, and they don't seem to like it very much, and I can't blame them because it's just like eating like jelly. So they don't tend to eat it. It just ends up sitting in the chook yard on a big lump. So what can you make with your sourdough? So the first one I've got on my list is sourdough crackers. And this is literally, and if you're driving, obviously don't try and write this down, wait till later. I might try and put a page up on my website. So go to www.mojohomestead.net and look for recipes and see if you can find it there, because hopefully by then I will have done it. So sourdough discard crackers is simply 1 cup of discard, a tablespoon of either oil or butter, and half a teaspoon of salt. And then you can just add in anything else. So herbs, cheese, sesame seeds, garlic powder, rock salt, whatever it is that you liked in your crackers, if you like them salty or whatever. If you'd like them a bit sweeter, you can always put cinnamon and things like that in, nutmeg. But that's crackers for just, have a cheese and crackers or dip or things like that. Now, you literally mix everything together and then just smooth it across a baking dish, a flat baking dish, and bake it at about 160 for Celsius people and 320 Fahrenheit for my US friends. 20-25 minutes. Bake it, and it helps if you kind of score it. You know those you get those little pinwheels that you use for baking. If you score it before you put it in the oven, then it makes it easier to kind of snap it into cookie shapes, into cracker shapes. And so you just bake it for 20-25 minutes, take it out of the oven, let it cool completely, because there will be a little bit, you'll have to wait for it to air cool. The thinner you go, the crispier it'll be. The thicker you go, I've done it once where it was a bit doughy, so you want to go reasonably thin. And you can store that in a tin for about 2 weeks and they'll still keep fresh. Much nicer than, not that I dislike Jatz crackers, but I don't eat them that much anyway. Oh, excuse me. Great for kids to snack on, especially if you mix some herbs or cheese or things like that in it. Great for kids to snack on. My kids love it as just a little quick snack when they're in a hurry to do something, to get some food in, but they're on their way to do something. Discard crumpets. These are our favourite. So 1 cup of discard, half a teaspoon of baking soda, or you can use bicarb soda. Sometimes if I don't, my baking soda is always down the back of the cupboard. The bicarb soda is always right at the front of the cupboard. Sometimes I'll just use bicarb soda instead of baking. Baking soda, I think, gives it less of a soda taste. But what I do, if the kids are having it, not me, if the kids are having it, I'll put the same amount of, or double the amount of sugar in. So if it's half a teaspoon of baking soda or bicarb, I will put 1 to 2 teaspoons of sugar in the mix as well. It just neutralises that soda taste. So a cup of discard, your baking soda or bicarb, a pinch of salt, and then butter. And I use an egg ring and put it in the fry pan and make sure it's well oiled around the egg ring. So get a bit of butter and wipe it around there. And you put it in there and wait for it to bubble. And what will happen is, and don't overfill it. That's my hot tip, is if you overfill it, it doesn't cook all the way through and you end up with a doughy crumpet. So probably about halfway up the side of the egg rings, and then once the bubbles have come all up through like they do with pancakes, then you can take the egg ring off and give it a flip and brown it on the other side. But you want it mostly cooked through from the underside before you flip it. And then just drizzle it with butter and honey. Awesome. You can, if you want fluffier crumpets, not that I can ever be bothered to wait the amount of time, but it has happened where I've put the mixture there and then had to go deal with an animal emergency and come back in. If you let it rest, it will get fluffier. You'll end up with really fluffy crumpets. Probably should learn to have some patience, shouldn't I? Now, you can freeze them once they're cooked. Cool them right down. Put a bit of greased paper or something in between them. Freeze them in a Clip-Lock bag. And when you get them out of the freezer, you can chuck them straight in the toaster. As long as there's not too much moisture in them, chuck them in the toaster, put the toaster down, and they will heat through and be nice and warm and lovely straight out of the freezer, which is awesome. Now, what else have I got? Pancakes, sweet or savoury, you can make. You just add sugar if you want sweeter rather than savoury. Again, 1 cup of discard, so they're all about the same. These recipes, all about 1 cup. I use this mix for waffles as well. Sometimes it works as long as you haven't made it too runny. 1 cup of discard, an egg, and then enough milk just to make it the right consistency for whether you're using it for pancakes or for waffles. So a bit thicker if it's for waffles. And a little bit of a pinch of salt. Then you can add some sugar or even some cinnamon, or I have also done it with like chaffles where I've added cheese into it for waffles, and that makes it really nice as well. And just cooks like a regular pancake. Pizza base, you can use just your normal sourdough bread dough to make pizza base. But you can also use discard for it because it doesn't need to rise. So if you've got discard there, just do it as if you're doing a normal pizza base. What's that? Flour and water it'd be sourdough, maybe a little bit of flour, a little bit of water, depending on the consistency that you're after. And you can cold ferment it in the fridge. So you can make up a ball of pizza dough, chuck it in the fridge, come back out, roll it out right before you want to use it and put it in the oven. That one goes in at 220 Celsius, so 425 for my Fahrenheit friends, and you'll get a really nice pizza base out of that. Flatbreads is the same. We just roll them out and cook them in the fry pan, and we tend to do a naan bread with our butter chicken that we make, but I've just started doing flatbreads for things like putting mince in between or making pizza kind of bases, that type of thing. Oh, I'm nearly going to have a sip of tea in a second. And it is handy if you've got extra discard and you're not sure what to do with it, whack it in the fridge, because if you are having one of those weeks where you haven't got everything planned out, you might come across something and go, oh shit, I can use that discard for that. Like I can make up a pizza base or whatever. Anyway, it was a quick one this week. That's pretty much everything that I've got to go through. I was just having a look. Yeah, the main thing with the sourdough discard is just that you wouldn't use it for bread because it's not active and it's not going to get the same rise. So anything that you don't need a rise out of, sounds like you're having a fight with somebody. anything you don't need a rise out of, you can use your sourdough discard for. And certainly it makes a quick brekkie in the morning if you're after the crumpets. Now, next week, we are going to talk about freezing and preserving of baked goods that you've made from sourdough. And sourdough, they cope really well with being in the fridge and freezer. So, like, it just seems to last a lot longer. I don't know whether it's just the way that it's fermented. But also too, I have got some exciting news. If you made it all the way to the end, super, super exciting news. So don't forget, you can get your sourdough cheat sheet still at www.mojohomestead.net/sourdough starter. And that will give you a 12-day cheat sheet for growing your own sourdough starter. But I have some super exciting news. I am going to host a completely free webinar on, looking at my calendar, the 19th, Australian time, the 19th of June at 10 a.m, which I think for my US friends, it's Wednesday afternoon between 5 and 9, depending on whereabouts you are in the country. For my English friends, I'm so sorry. It's like 1 o'clock in the morning. It was the best time for me to do it with no kids in the house and no handy helper in the house and nothing that required doing in the house. I might try and do an encore of it at a time that is definitely more friendly to my UK friends, because I do have a few UK listeners out there and I feel like you guys get jibbed by us Australians because we're completely opposite ends of the world and it just makes it so hard. So I'll try and do another one, possibly Friday morning. But if you are interested in learning about how to go about everything that you need to know before you have chickens in your backyard or on your small acreage, then this is the webinar for you. We're discussing everything: eggs, meat birds, the whole lot, the whole kit and caboodle, the kind of legislation that you need to think about if you're doing it in a backyard, what equipment you need, what you can get away with, what you absolutely have to have, what you don't need to have, and it's nice to have, but you can get it down the track. So, free webinar, and I will put the link in the show notes, but it is June 2025, I think, /June 2025, or webinar June 2000. Look in the show notes because I have no idea. I've only had 2 cups of coffee this morning and I'm still not functioning properly after being away in Sydney all weekend. But if you want to come along to the webinar, I would love to see you there. If you can't make it live, don't stress. So for my friends that are overseas, if you can't make it live, don't stress. If you register for the webinar, you will still be sent a copy of the webinar once the recording is done. You'll get that sent out. I'll get it sent out hopefully within a couple of hours of doing it. So even if you can't make it to the live webinar, you will get a recording of it. And we're going to discuss everything. If you have any questions about chicken keeping, about meat birds, about egg layers, about backyards, about big acreages, one thing I didn't mention was we think we did lose a chook over the weekend, which has been the only thing that we've lost over that weekend away. We found a bunch of feathers, but we can't find a carcass or any signs of a bird missing. And we did a head count and it looked like everybody was still there. So I don't know, maybe it was a cockatoo. For those that aren't Australian, cockatoos are big white birds that we have. It was a whole bunch of white feathers. It could have been a cockatoo. Hit a power line we've got power lines that run across our property even though we're not on the grid. We couldn't find anything. And certainly we did a head count and didn't look like anyone were missing. But if you've got any questions at all about predators, about types of coops, about food, anything like that, send me a DM and I will make sure that I answer it in the webinar for you. Anyway, like I said, short episode this week, which is probably good because I've got a million things on my plate to get ready for the webinar next week. Otherwise, I will talk to you all next week. Bye for now. Well, that's it for today's episode of Ditch the Store. If you're loving the journey to self-sufficiency, be sure to subscribe. You can also leave a review for us or share this episode with a friend who's ready to break up with their supermarket. If you've got questions or success stories, we'd love to hear about them on the socials. You can also find me at www.mojohomestead.net. Until next time, keep raising, growing and making. And remember, life's too short for store-bought eggs.